Opening the door to new possibilities, to a creation of a digital ecosystem, India, ladies and gentlemen, is a rising power in the domain of technology, especially with open source being an important aspect of digital India. Now, riding this wave and fostering innovation, Reliance Jio, in partnership with Linux Foundation, supported by Cisco Systems, is proud to host the first ever India Digital Open Summit, bringing together eminent thought leaders and innovators for the purpose of evolving India's digital ecosystem as creators and developers of open source platforms and systems. I am Ramya Rao, your host for the summit, and I welcome you all once again here to Reliance Corporate Park in Mumbai. So keeping up with the digital trend, we encourage you to go ahead and tweet about the event and also initiate the conversations using the hashtag IDOS2018. Our Twitter handle for the summit is @IndiaOpenSummit. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, 2 of the best tweets will be chosen by a panel, and the winners will walk away with exciting prizes like iPhone X and Samsung Note 8. We also have similar and better goodies for 2 of the best questions that will be asked in the first half of the day during the panel discussions. That's not it, ladies and gentlemen. We're also looking for the 2 best ideas to make India the leader in open source systems and platforms. Kaleidoscope to innovation, your chance to ideate. So put on your thinking hats with some fabulous ideas to be shared to us by downloading GeoChat and submitting your idea in the India Digital Open Summit channel. Now, this particular contest is only open till 2:30 p.m. today. The top 4 ideas will make it to the polling, and you will all get an opportunity to vote the top 2 best ideas for the day. And we have some exciting prizes in stores. So yes, we look for an active participation from you all, not just offline, but also online. With that, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with the proceedings of the event. To begin with the event, we have an interesting topic. Rather, we are diving straight to the topic of open source infrastructure, boosting India's journey to a digital superpower. To speak on this topic, we have with us the CEO of Mirantis, Mr. Adrian Ayanil. Could we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? He has co-founded Mirantis and served as Mirantis CEO through October 2015, helping build the company into an open source leader. And in 2015, Forbes named Mr. Ayanil and Mirantis one of the best cloud CEOs and companies to work for. So we have a presentation right now by Mr. Adrian Ayanil. A huge round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. The stage is yours. Thank you so much.
All right. Morning, everyone. You know, it's my first time in India. I've been to many places around the world, but not India before. And it's quite interesting because India, at least that's my impression after a few days here, is an incredibly colorful, vibrant, joyful, growing, and young, ambitious place. You can feel it everywhere you go to Mumbai, or you can feel it very much here at the Reliance Corporate Park. That's the spirit of India. And to me, there is a direct relationship between that spirit of India and what open source is all about. Because if you're looking at the open source movement that's spreading around the world, it's also colorful, ambitious, risk-taking, sometimes unpredictable, but it very much changes the world. So I find it very fitting that we have this topic of open source, and open source helping transform India into a digital superpower here in Mumbai. As we all have seen, open source has spread around the world, and it's making a huge impact. But there are some interesting insights that I want to share with you today about open source, which interestingly are not about technology. And I want to start with the contribution to open source by engineers around the world. And we all know that India produces some of the most gifted, most talented software engineers on the planet. And in fact, if you look today, two of the most iconic companies in the world, Google and Microsoft, are run by Indian leaders. And not only are they of Indian origin, but they were brought up in India. So we know that Indian talent makes a huge impact in software around the world. However, if you look at the open source picture and dig a little deeper, you will find that India is not even in the top 10 contributors to open source around the world. And there is a very, very interesting question, why? And I also see this as a huge opportunity for India to take the next step in assuming a leadership role for the technology development of the world. And in fact, if you look at the map of open source contributions around the world, you will see that some interesting countries, there are small countries, whether it's Hungary or Norway, compared to the number of people they have, are making a huge contribution. And actually there is a lesson there. There is an insight there as to why certain countries with certain backgrounds and certain philosophies and certain social norms and cultures are more in a leadership role in open source than others. And I'm hoping that, as you will see throughout my talk this morning, India has a tremendous opportunity there. If you're looking at the digital infrastructure today, it's clear that mobile is the way of the world. Everything is going towards mobile. And the developing economies, the young economies, the vibrant economies like India, like China, like South America and others are definitely leading the wave there. And if you're looking at the entire mobile stack, all of us are using mobile apps today, whether it's an Instagram or Facebook or a WeChat or whatever it is that you're using. You will see that as you go through that mobile stack, 99.9% of the software that powers that stack, from the operating system on your phone, to the web server, to the database, to the operating system, to the last bit on the metal, is powered by open source software. Without any doubt, open source is powering the internet wave that we are on today. Now, why is that, you may ask? There are some very, very fundamental reasons. And that's because open source is quite different as a way of building technology or building software than the traditional proprietary method. And that has created a cost structure, and that has created a pace of innovation that other approaches, like the traditional proprietary software development approach, cannot match. And that's what I want to talk with you about later this morning. So let us come back to this question. What is unique and what is different about how open source software, open source technology is being built? And To dig a little bit deeper into this question, it's helpful to look at how open source got started in the first place. And if you go to the origins of open source, you'll see the first unique thing about how open source software is built. And that is really very much the users who had a particular problem who built the open source software in the first place. So in many, many cases, the users who had a problem they wanted solved used the open source approach to create software, solve that problem, and share it with others. And that has some very, very profound consequences that carried through the entire open source wave to this day. The most important one is that in the open source development model, users and developers tend to be very, very tightly connected. There is no bureaucracy. There is very often no sales and marketing. There is no financial interest or any other motivation that comes between the user of a piece of technology and the creator. And that has created a very, very tight bond between the people who have problems and the people who have the talent to solve those problems. So that's one very fundamental difference about open source. There are other differences as well that are also quite profound. For example, in an open source development model, you don't have a hierarchical approach to decision making. Most of the decisions about what should be built, what should be prioritized, what is important, happen bottoms up. And they happen organically in a sometimes unpredictable, creative, fluid, but miraculously it's working decision-making process. That's also quite unique and very, very different from the traditional technology development approach. The third thing that is very special about open source is that vendors or companies like Mirantis, my company, play in this space, do not have a lock-in with a customer in terms of commercial relationship because the software is open. The customers at any point in time can decide to go to a different vendor or support themselves and end the relationship. And that has also some very, very profound consequences for the behavior of the open source vendors and players in the marketplace. Because we know that at any point in time, if we do not create tremendous value for our customers and don't provide an excellent quality of service, we can be replaced. So that creates a lot of energy, a lot of motivation to stay on the leading edge and to do the very best possible job we can to serve our customers. So these are some very, very profound differences on how open source software is being built and how open source communities work that have created tremendous results. And the results that you can see today is that the pace of innovation in open source is mind-boggling. All of you here have heard of the Moore's Law, where every 2 years the performance of chips is doubling. In the open source world, every 14 months, the open source contributions, the code base, the open code base that is produced in the world doubles. And so does the number of open source contributors. It's incredible. And that's really been driven not so much by technology. And this brings me back to the introduction on the first slide in my talk. It's been driven by a different way of organizing the way engineers get work done, and by creating different incentive structures and a different approach for people to come together and build something valuable. That's truly the unique power of the open source model. So in our experience at Mirantis, open source is first and foremost about social change. It's about different behaviors, different dynamics, different ways of leading teams, different ways of incentivizing teams, different ways of bringing people together to build new technology that's truly valuable to our customers. And here, I want to make to share some personal anecdote, personal story and remarks that connects to Reliance Jio and our journey together, and why I am so proud and honored and at the same time humbled to be here with you today. We first met with Reliance Jio 4 years ago back in Mountain View in Silicon Valley. And we were very excited to hear their vision. We felt it was very ambitious, very compelling. It was risk-taking, and the world is built by risk takers. So it resonated with us right away, and we wanted to move forward and partner with Jio. At the same time, a good number of engineers at Mirantis and some of our board members had this perception that Reliance is a demanding company, that Reliance pushes the boundaries, that Reliance is asking their partners and their vendors to step up and meet high quality standards and break boundaries and make new things happen. They do not accept average. So they said to me more than once, it was a long discussion that carried out over weeks. Hey, listen, be careful. I'm not sure we want to do this. There's quite a bit of risk. We're not sure about this. We don't think this is a good idea. We moved forward. I felt very, very strongly that this is the type of customers, these are the types of partners that we need. People with big goals, big ambitions, high standards in terms of what they want to accomplish, and willing to take a risk and not accepting average or the status quo as their limitations. And I felt very, very strongly that by working with companies like Jio, it will make us better at Mirantis. It will make us more competitive. It will be more challenging, more fun, more energizing, more powerful for everybody in the company. So that very much connects to this development model and social dynamics in open source. Because to contribute in open source, to become an engineer who carries big weight in an open source project, you have to take risks. There isn't a boss out there, there isn't some governance who's going to take you by the hand and is going to say, work on this thing, here's how you do it, make a contribution, this is your path to contribute to an open source project or become a distinguished engineer in open source. There is no such thing. You start, you connect, you take a risk, you propose an idea, you will fail many times, you will get a lot of pushback and criticism from the more experienced engineers, and you will have to create your own path, build your own path. It's the attitude for someone who wants to learn, wants to grow, wants to develop, and is unafraid to fail. That's what participating in open source and building successful, strong open source communities is all about. So that brings me back to this picture here that you see, and you see this little bit of German up there, OpenStack-Vergnügen. And I want to kind of explain the story behind this picture and how does it connect to open source and this risk-taking attitude. We took this picture where you see a good part of the Mirantis team at headquarters, our old headquarters in Mountain View, with their cars, in order to help us win Volkswagen as a customer back in 2015, when Volkswagen was deciding if they want to go with their incumbent vendor for their global next generation connected car platform they are building. Because in the future, every single car that Volkswagen will produce will connect to a cloud through a mobile connection and will be intelligent. Internet of Things. That means 10 million cars every year will be connected to the Volkswagen cloud. One of the largest cloud projects on the planet. And we were in a dogfight to win it. So we took this picture to show that we as a company, we are willing to go the extra mile. You see here our employees showing how many of them are driving Volkswagen brands, Volkswagen cars or Audis, in order to win a very large customer and to show the level of passion and commitment we have towards making something unique happen. And in fact, we did win it later this year, and the next generation Volkswagen digital platform is running on the Mirantis open source cloud platform with our unique pure play approach to open source. But all of this is possible really not so much because of technology. It's possible because of the unique spirit of openness and risk-taking that we built in our company, and that's central to open source. So now, in closing my talk, I want to come back to the opening, that map of the world, and India's contribution to open source, and India's path to becoming a digital superpower, not just in consuming open source, but actually in co-creating, contributing, being part of a movement that creates software for the rest of the world. And in my view, where India has the most opportunity to make a change and leap forward is not in the level of technical expertise that engineers have, because you're already at the top of the world. You already have the best minds, among the best minds, the most brilliant engineers on the planet today, and you have many of them. The opportunity is for you to consider and think about how can you change the social dynamics, the way you run teams, build teams, lead teams, to be more bottoms up, to encourage more risk-taking, more independent decision-making, more room for failure, so that you can take advantage of this huge open source wave that's out there. That's where I see the biggest opportunity for change and for leaping forward. So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and thank you very much for listening to my talk. I wish you the very best and look forward to meeting many of you later today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adrian. Well, we'll move forward to the next topic on open source telecom stack for India's leadership. And to present on this topic, we have with us the CEO and President of Radisys Corporation, who comes with more than 18 years of experience under his belt with providing excellent leadership in his entire journey for Radisys. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Brian Bronson. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? Not yet? Okay, here we go. That means I don't get to walk around that much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be invited here to speak. It's also fortunate for me, over 80% of our employees are in India, and of course, Jio is a precious customer for us. So, and also about 5 years ago, we set out as a company to redirect our strategy to actually make open source a commercial reality. So my presentation over the next 15 or 20 minutes will to give you some examples on open source, and not just open source in the purest sense, but other ways to disrupt telecom infrastructure to get the ARPU and TCO advantages that everybody wants. So I probably don't need to tell you about the future of networks. What needs to happen is they're unbundled. Everybody knows that we're unbundling software and hardware, that we're trying to focus and get into a VNF space, and from a network function perspective, we're separating out control and user plane. Everybody talks about the cloud. Everybody knows the acronyms of SDN and NFV now, orchestration, network slicing,